Hey, so we are actually only 3 weeks away from Easter. Believe it or not, it's getting up there. So for the next couple of weeks, we're going to be kind of talking about the different characters that play a pretty big role in this final part of Jesus' life. And today we're going to start with Peter. So we're going to focus more on Peter and his story throughout this narrative rather than the confrontation of Jesus and the priests and so forth. So that's kind of where we're going with this. So let's go and get started. So we see here today, this is the moment in which Jesus gets arrested. And Jesus has been talking about the hour. And if you've been coming with us throughout John, he's been saying, the hour has not yet come, the hour has not yet come, then the hour has come now for me to be glorified. And then he prays, Lord, glorify me so that I might glorify you. And that glory is actually starting to take place today. Even through Jesus' arrest, we begin to see that God is going to be glorified. How? So let's take a look at the text for today. In John 18, 1-3, it says the following. When Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden, which he and his disciples entered. Now Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place, for Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers and some officers from the chief priests and the Pharisees, went there with the lanterns and torches and weapons. So there's a little bit of irony going on here in terms of like where this is all taking place. So this is happening in this garden that is well known to all of them. People say that even it says here in verse 2 that Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place. So this was a place in which they had gone regularly. Jesus took them to a place here at Kidron. It was a place in which they would go there to pray. They would go there to be discipled. It was like hallowed ground, like a safe place, a sanctuary for each one of them. They knew it because Jesus would go there to be with them. And so now this becomes a place in which he's betrayed. Judas, he leads a band of soldiers there to arrest Jesus, and here's how it unfolds. It says, then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, came forward and said to them, to the crowd that was approaching, whom do you seek? They answered him, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus said to them, I am he. I want to pause here. I am he. Most scholars agree that throughout all the various translations, it always translates this to say I am he, but they note that it's actually not literally I am he. It's just a way for them to smooth out that sentence because it wouldn't make sense to say what he actually said, which is, who do you seek? And Jesus said, and they asked Jesus of Nazareth, and then he replied, I am. That's actually what he said, I am. That's important, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So then he says, I am. And then they drew back and fell to the ground. So they asked him again, whom do you seek? And he says, Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus answered, I told you that I am. So if you seek me, let these men go. So here he is. It's a pretty scary scenario. By the way, I should remind you, or just let you know, we're not going to have discussion. So if you feel like you're twisting your back by going this way, feel free to just adjust your chairs. Feel free, because I feel bad for your back as I'm looking at you. Okay, so I just imagine how scary this night would have been. Dead of night, he's with his closest friends, the disciples that he's been raising up this entire time, and suddenly you hear a noise. And you know how it is at night when you hear noises. It's been extremely windy these days, right? At night, you hear a noise and it's pitch dark. You get a little freaked out. And then you're like, is it a noise or is it just some random stirring of the night? But no, it gets louder and louder. And then you begin to see off in the distance, oh, I think those are lanterns. And then the lanterns are glistening off of the soldiers. And so as they're marching and they're hearing this slow progression, they know, oh no, someone's definitely coming. And that's what they see. And they can tell that they're armed by how it sounds. And so one thing that we see in this text is that Jesus shows such courage. He shows courage because he knows, it says in verse 4, knowing all that would happen to him. What does that mean? Knowing all that would happen to him. What's that all that's going to happen? It's the cross. He knows that the hour of his death is now soon thereupon, and it's starting. So he knows, so he steps out in courage to meet the crowd head on. And this is a tense moment. It's a tense moment. In The Passion of the Christ, which is one of the great movies about this particular incident, you can tell it's a very tense moment. It's not sure what's about to happen. Judas has with him a ragtag group. It says here Roman soldiers were with him. And there were actually more troops. It's known throughout history that during the times of religious festivals, Rome would send more troops there because this was the time when all the religious uprisings would happen. So you'd have troops from all over the Roman Empire descending upon there. They don't really know what's going on. All they know is that they're there to arrest this religious leader. Along with them, there are the priests and some of the temple officials, and then other gospels tell us that there were temple guards. So this is a weird mix of both Roman soldiers, chief priests, and then like temple guards, and they're all going to arrest Jesus, whom they know is a miracle worker, a powerful preacher with a band of devoted followers. Who knows what's about to happen? So I just want to set that environment up because it is tense. And as the disciples see, they're probably thinking, oh gosh, something's about to go down. And so it's amazing what Jesus does. He steps out and he says, whom do you seek? And they say to him, I seek Jesus of Nazareth. I am he. How did Jesus say this? How did he say it? It must have been pretty powerful because it tells us that those who heard it, they drew back and they fell to the ground. And that's just a weird scene, right? Like he says, I am, and then they fall back. So then why does he do that? It's because the public pronouncement of I am, that public acknowledgement in the world that God has come into the world, it must have done something. I am is the revered name that God chose to use for himself in the book of Exodus when Moses asked God, what is your name? And he says, I am. So Jesus here pronounces truth, I am. And so commentators note, perhaps heaven itself opened up and divine power shone through enough to knock all of these people onto their butts. So it is a strange scene. That's strange, but when you step back, it's even stranger. Think about the fact that Jesus knew that they're about to be betrayed. Judas didn't have to go like, oh, I wonder where he is tonight. No, he knows exactly where he is. And then Jesus is like, well, there I am. As you knew where I would be, there I am. And then he's a person of incredible power, such that he even utters his name and they all fall down. In the Gospel of Matthew, he even says, do you not know that at this very moment, I can call upon the 12 legions of angels, 72,000 angels at his beck and call could have come to protect him against what is about to happen, but yet Jesus doesn't. He doesn't invoke the power that is upon him. He merely utters his name. And in the bewildered eyes of the disciples, as all of this is happening, this is a terrible night. Things are falling apart. Their master's being arrested. We see one thing very clearly. God is in control of this entire situation. Jesus wasn't arrested as some sort of pathetic martyr, tragically betrayed. No, God is in control. Jesus, full of divine power, is laying down his life. He's offering his life up in obedience to the Father's plan. But does it feel like that to anyone involved? To the arresting party that arrives that day, they think, oh, we finally got this guy. We're going to put an end to this Jesus movement. To the disciples, they're there and they're seeing all this taking place and they're like, oh man, which is why Peter does what he does, right? Oh man, I don't know what's about to go down. The only one that knew what was actually happening, the only one that knew who was in control was, in fact, God. And even in his arrest, Jesus says in verse 8, let my men go. You're here for me. Let them go. Protecting his disciples all the way to the very end. And then in some various gospels, you have pretty funny stories of people their clothes being grabbed and they run off, and there's all that. It's a very sad, kind of pathetic story. But Peter, he doesn't get what's going on. In the midst of the moment, as all this is happening, he doesn't get what's going on. He's just trying to be faithful to Jesus. He's unwilling to see this unfold without him at least doing some sort of fight. He doesn't get that Jesus can stop all of this if he so desired, but he doesn't do it because it's the Father's will for him to go. So Peter tries to intervene. And that is such an interesting picture and a stark picture for all of us. What does he try to do? He does this. He picks up the sword from his sheath and he cuts off Malchus's ear. Just to finish the story of Malchus, in Luke, it tells us that Jesus heals him. So everyone oh man, what happened to Malchus? It's okay. He got his ear back. Very traumatic night, though, let me tell you. But he says, put the sword away. Shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given me? What does he mean, the cup? The cup represents the cup of God's wrath. God sent Jesus to take all of his wrath. That's the gospel message, that Jesus was sent to take the wrath of God, God's judgment upon all mankind, because we're all sinners. So did Jesus pay the price because he himself was a sinner? No. He didn't pay the price because he was a sinner. No, he was perfect. He lived a perfect life, the sinless life, but he took on the wrath. Jesus became sin, who knew no sin, so that in him and in his death, he could pay the price for each one of us. That's the gospel message. God sent Jesus to die an atoning death for our sake on the cross. This was his plan. This was his way of knowing that God was in control. But as that plan is unfolding, everyone there is like, I don't know what's going on. They're fleeing. They're cutting off people's ears. It's all a hot mess. Jesus was saying, no, all of this is happening according to God's plan. Drop the sword. Drop the sword. Yesterday, during our retreat, I used the phrase, use the sword. And you guys can remember that in your spiritual battle. But this is a different one, okay? This is drop the sword. Drop the sword. This past weekend, we were also studying about spiritual battle, how Satan is described by Peter, same Peter, as a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. How Satan delights to distract and discourage and to dishearten followers of Jesus. We talked about how Satan isn't going to go after low priority prey, people who on their own are not doing anything to advance God's kingdom. For those people who aren't doing anything to advance God's kingdom, Satan's like, what? I'm not going to do anything anyways. They ain't doing nothing. They good. Keep doing you, man. You do you. But if you're living in accordance to God's will, if you're living in obedience to his command to take the fight to the very hell, the gates of hell, if you're actually trying to do that, to go into the nations, to have the audacity to live for Jesus and to live according to God's will in the big 2-6, if that's you, then yes, Satan is looking to devour you. Yes, there is persecution when we choose to obey God. Yes, the cup is going to feel like wrath, like why do I have to go through this? Why are we trying to build up church and people are trying to stop us from doing that? Why are there so many haters in the world? Accusers for no particularly great reason. And whenever we face that kind of heat, our instinct, our natural instinct is to grab the sword and to start swinging like mad. But one thing that we can see from this picture, we see Jesus telling Peter, and maybe perhaps he's telling all of us today, I told you already that the world will always hate Christians who are trying to faithfully obey his commands. Put that sword away. Don't be discouraged and disengaged and disheartened because God is in control over all history. God is in control. Even in these moments where you feel like, oh, I don't know what's going on, man. And the first thing we want to do is grab that sword. God is in control. Perhaps right at this moment, it doesn't feel like it, but God is in control. So here's what I want to do. For the next 60 seconds, I kind of made our handout a little differently today because I just want to encourage you to have these takeaways. So in section 1, we're in section 1 right now. There's 2 more sections. I'm just letting you know how long the message is. In section 1, under the takeaway, just want to give you a moment to write down a takeaway. How's God speaking to you right now? What are ways that you feel like, man, life is out of control? Life is out of control. Got big decisions to make. And as you face those big decisions, perhaps you feel tempted to grab that sword and start swinging away. But what's one way that you can honor the Lord and indeed trust him that he's in control? So why don't we take a moment to just do that? So here Jesus, he gets arrested in the midst of all of this, and it don't feel like it, but God is indeed in control of that situation. And so then what happens? It's the story of Peter begins to unfold further. Simon Peter followed Jesus, and so did another disciple. In this week's studying for this text, I didn't know this, but it's quite interesting. There's a running debate among like the 5 people who care on who this other disciple is. Let's just say it's John. Most people think it's John. But there is some debate as to who this might be. So this disciple, since the disciple was known to the high priest, he entered with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest, but Peter stood outside at the door. So the other disciple who was known to the high priest went out and spoke to the servant girl who kept watch at the door and brought Peter in. Now the servants and officers had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing and warming themselves. Peter also was with them, standing and warming himself. And again, later on it says, now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself. Now, there is known that maybe John and Peter were kind of like rivals. And so as John's writing this gospel, he's like, I'm just going to really hammer it in. That Peter was standing and warming himself. He was standing and warming himself. And did I tell you, he was standing and warming himself. Why does he keep bringing this up? Throw shade, that's one. But the other is because as Jesus is getting arrested, all the disciples flee, except Peter and this one other disciple. There's some debate, like I mentioned. But Peter, he follows Jesus, kind of, but he follows at a distance. And so as John's writing this gospel, I think he's making it very clear that Peter, on the one hand, follows Jesus, but on the other hand, he stays at a distance, and he was outside crowd. Come on, guys, this was like extremely easy, like preacher response, help me out here. Peter was outside. How do we know that? Because he says it 3 times, right? Because he says it 3 times. He goes out into the courtyard and there's a charcoal fire there, seemingly irrelevant detail, but we know in a few weeks, we'll talk about why that's not irrelevant. Jesus is being questioned inside. Peter knows Jesus is inside, but he himself is outside, standing and warming himself. What's that all about? We get this. It's cold. That's why he's standing and warming himself. We get that. Besides, what good is Peter, this one guy, who now has his sword in his sheath and he's not even allowed to take it out? What's he supposed to do? Run in there? Hey, everybody, Jesus is totally innocent, by the way, and then subsequently get arrested, probably get beat up, thrown out, whatever. It's useless. Practically speaking, what a waste. What a waste. And besides, what's he going to say? What's he going to do? Him and his one-man army. So you understand why he's there, because he loves the Lord, but you also understand why he doesn't go inside and do the very thing he said he was going to do. It's confusing. Things are happening so fast. Earlier that night, they were in the upper room. And while they're in that upper room, they're having the final meal together. Jesus is washing his disciples' feet. They are praying together. They are making commitments together. Peter himself is feeling all sorts of like yes. He even tells Jesus, I will lay down my life for you. He would do anything for Peter. And now, Jesus, who was once so powerful, invincible, impervious to death, is being dragged away like a common criminal, like an animal trapped in a cage. And so for Peter, all of this is very, very strange. What would anyone do? He wasn't with Jesus inside, he was instead outside, sitting and standing with the very people who are putting Jesus under trial. I think we've all been scared too. So whenever we feel vulnerable, we also go to our charcoal fires. We go near to feel safe and warm. Peter knows that this safety is short-lived, as we oftentimes know. It's not going to solve the situation, but you know what? At least there's some semblance of safety there versus inside. He's already denied Jesus once, but that was just the cost of getting inside the temple. Does that make sense? Do you know Jesus? No, I don't. Okay, now you can come in. So, okay, that makes sense, but you know what? That first denial makes it a lot easier for the subsequent other denials. So it says here in verse 25 to 27, as he's there, they say, hey, you also are not one of the disciples, are you? Like they're making it so easy for him to say, no. And they're probably asking it in this way because they're like, because if you're one of them, you should be like fighting us, or like maybe you should be inside. You certainly would not be standing and warming yourself with us. No. And then one of the servants of the high priest, a relative of Malchus, is like, hey, you know a funny thing, man? My cousin got his ear cut off tonight. And He said it was you, like, is it you? And again, Peter denied it. Now he's like literally being accused of cutting off someone's ear. But it's weird because these denials, first to get in, second to be, oh, no, I'm not one of them. And now, hey man, aren't you the guy that cut off his ear? You see this kind of progression taking place. So what do we see? This is a picture of what compromise looks like. This is what a picture of compromise looks like. It's not like Peter is surrounded by these highly trained Roman centurions who are master interrogators, who are questioning him and like pinning him down and like, no, we have video evidence of you. I was driving for our DC trip. I got a ticket because they took a picture of my car traveling a little bit over the speed limit. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's not like a surveillance state like it is in Maryland. Here, no, like they don't know. Like they're just asking, hey, weren't you that guy there? Don't you know him? Like, are you sure you're not him? And he just says, no. Just a simple question by these people, but he denied him 3 times. But perhaps we shouldn't be surprised because people deny Jesus all the time. People deny Jesus all the time in big and small ways. How many times did Peter deny Jesus? Verbally, he denied him 3 times. But through his actions, he did plenty more. We can count the ways each time he denied Jesus' lordship. Peter followed at a distance. He stood outside, standing by the fire, warming himself, instead of following Jesus into the suffering that was going on inside. His words, I don't know him, they're just mere affirmations of what his actions already show. Isn't that true of our lives? Maybe you don't literally say, I don't know Jesus. But our actions can sometimes be just as loud, just as clear, just as obvious as the things that we say. Maybe you don't literally say, I don't know Jesus. But it's when we make choices, I will do this, or I'm not going to do that, that we show the world who our true Lord is. When we treat Jesus less than who he is, the Lord of our lives. We do it because of life, because of fears, because of desires, because of wants. We make decisions because we have a priori commitments to other things other than Jesus. And so it doesn't seem so outright that I'm denying Jesus. But if you were to do a categorical look at your life, you'd say, I denied him there. And I did it there too. And actually I did it there. So whether I said it with my mouth or I did it with my feet, I chose. I chose to warm myself by the fire instead of joining Jesus where he is. Peter and the other disciples were no better. We don't see the story of Peter and then go like, tisk, 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 Peter. Can't believe you did that. No, Peter's story is here because perhaps John wants to throw shade. But another reason is because we're supposed to say, Peter, man, I'm just like you. I'm just like you. Nobody ever starts off by saying, I'm going to deny Jesus to his face. Not really, or hardly ever. No one ever says, I hate God. I'm done with this Jesus. But it's just the things that we do. A desire that you have. A desire for intimacy, a desire for romance, a desire to feel wanted. And so then you make decisions that go against Jesus' lordship. A desire to make much of yourself, a desire to be known, a desire to be famous, a desire to be safe, a desire to be comfortable, a desire to be fill in the blank. And then because of that desire so strong, and that fire is so comfortable, and it's a lot easier just to stand outside than to go inside with Jesus and to follow him all the way to the end, we make these decisions. This is what it looks like to deny Jesus. Peter's last denial, what happens? The rooster crows. Again, random detail, but it's just as Jesus predicted. Rooster crows as Peter tells Jesus, I'm going to lay down my life for you. Jesus questions that and says, hey, Peter, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. When that rooster crows, Peter is triggered. He's brought back to the time when he was in that upper room having that Last Supper. Worst thing about this is that for the rest of his life, anytime the rooster crows, which is every single morning, he would remember this. I'm like, oh man, rest of his life, that's unfortunate. In that upper room, it was an amazing time. Jesus had washed his feet, commanded them, hey, just as I did this to you, now you do this to one another. He told them about the coming of the Holy Spirit. He said, guys, I'm going to be going away. It's to your advantage that I go away. And they were all there, and they were all nodding their heads. They didn't understand what Jesus was saying, but they're like, yes, okay, I got it. I'll do that. Peter had made some bold claims about himself. Peter was corrected by Jesus, set him straight. But then he probably was like, well, nonetheless, I'm still going to follow you, Jesus. In that room, that upper room moment, these kinds of commitments, they can become so clear. When you're in the upper room, when you're in that right environment, when you're in a space like that, when Jesus' words are clear, things are so obvious to you. I think a lot of us have those upper room moments. When we look back on your own life, we need these upper room moments. We need moments when everything is clear because life gets crazy. People can just be like that sometimes, is what we say. And we can commit to all sorts of things, sometimes in tears, moments of convictions. Those are true moments. It's just, well, things happen. So what was that upper room moment for you when you made some sort of clear commitment to follow Jesus, when you understood the gospel and you said to yourself, I will do this? I think for me, there are several moments that really stand out. I remember my first mission trip, still my favorite mission trip of all time, which is why I love Japan. The food's good too. But I love Japan because of this. I remember I went to Japan. I was a new Christian. I was like 1 year into my Christian walk. I went to Japan, and I thought I was hot stuff for several reasons. But one reason was that I was in student government when I was in Berkeley. So I was like, well, I know how to tell people about things. And so I go to Japan, ready to set the whole world on fire for Jesus. And I go, and you know what? Turns out knowing English in Japan, not that helpful. Not knowing Japan, a huge hindrance, right? So I go there, and I'm trying to flyer to people. No one's taking my flyer. I'm at Todai, which is the top university, the Michigan of Japan, right? So there I am. I'm passing out flyers. I'm trying to play basketball. Nobody wants to play basketball with a bunch of Americans. I'm trying to talk to people, and they're super polite because Japanese people tend to be very polite. And they're like, no, thank you. I'm like, okay. I am dying, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I paid this much money. I'm using my last summer before law school to come out here. Man, what am I doing? In utter defeat, I go to the dining hall, not to reach out with the gospel, not to reach out to anybody, but because I'm tired, because I'm worldly and secular. So I go into there, and I'm sweating buckets, and I'm just like, I just need a drink. So I get a drink, and I'm sitting down, and I take out my flyers that are in my pants pocket, because they told us you're not allowed to wear shorts there. And I'm like, why? So we're wearing long pants, and so I took them all out. They are soaked. These paper flyers are soaked. So actually, I'm letting them dry out in the AC. I spread them all out because it's so gross, right? They're all bending upwards. And then this guy comes up to me, and he goes, hey, what are those? Extremely broken English. And I'm like, they're flyers. Flyers for what? Seriously? Flyers for this event that I'm doing. Where are you from? Stop asking me questions. You can have a seat. He reverse evangelizes to me and says, are you a Christian? I'm like, yes, I am. What are you here for? I'm here to share the gospel. What is the gospel? And I'm like, seriously, God? I just want 5 minutes. Can you just give me 5 minutes? Because that's how spiritual I am, right? And then I share the gospel with him. I invite him to this event. And for the rest of the mission trip, I'm on cloud 9. Because this guy comes with us to every single event, every gospel event that we do. My strongest memory of Japan is going onto the subway as we're going away, and he's at the subway station bowing to the train. Because Japanese people are very respectful. And he writes me the most wonderful letter. Thank you so much for sharing the gospel. He never became Christian as far as I know. But that moment, I remember, 22, 23, something like that, saying, God, I could do this for the rest of my life. God, let me do this for the rest of my life, because there's nothing else as important as sharing the gospel. Do you have those upper room moments where you remembered so clearly, God, this is it. This is the most important thing I can do with my life. Maybe it was a retreat. I pray for all the Filter of Hope people. It was in the Dominican Republic where you lost your heart, you kept your heart there, where you remembered, man, this is the most important thing I can do with my life. Where God is real. Jesus is real. It might not have been a mission trip. It might have been at a retreat. Maybe it was yesterday at the spring retreat. I hope it was, because I put a lot of energy into that. And you're at this retreat, and perhaps you're at a campfire, or maybe you're at a winter retreat, or maybe you're at a youth rally when you were in youth group when you were a kid, and you heard the youth pastor preach, and you're just like, yes, this is true. Yes, I believe this. People are dying, they're going to heaven and hell. My life purpose could not be more clear. Jesus, my yes is on the table. And so then you commit, and you say, I'm going to do this. I don't know what caused you to do it. Maybe it was the guitar. Maybe it was because you were so tired and so sweaty that you would have said yes to anything. I don't know. Maybe it was the Holy Spirit. But when was the last time you had that upper room commitment moment? My whole life wholly devoted to you. But then something happens. Something always happens. Time happens. Fears happens. Life changes. You change. Your fears are amplified. Opposition rises. Another annoying post on Reddit is posted. Your pride flares up. You lose that sense of control over your life. Why am I doing this? Is what you feel. You feel shaky. You feel uncertain. The cost of discipleship are too much. My whole life, I was just going to give you my summer and like maybe my next summer and maybe my first year out of after I graduate as a CPI because I'm super devoted. But that's about it. After that, it's my life. And you start to feel those pulls. Or that cute girl who's not a Christian asks you out and you're not sure what you're supposed to say, although you are sure what you're supposed to say. And you have those moments. That's the truth. So what can you do? You can try to chalk up those upper room moments as just like emotionalism, but it's hard because the power of that moment keeps coming back to you. And you're like, no, it was true. The gospel was true. So what has changed? What's changed? It's not the gospel. The gospel's never changed. God's still real. Jesus is still the Savior of the world. My life still is His. Only thing that's changed is our fears, anxieties, idols, different sins, you feeling like you're losing control over your life. So then what can you do? The rooster crows, and Peter's reminded, this is how I deny Jesus. You can run away. You can try to run away from the gospel, but I think you know that it won't work. Here's how Matthew describes it. Immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. Peter wept bitterly because he wasn't trying to self-correct. He was repenting, acknowledging the truth of who he was, admitting the truth. What's the truth, Peter? The truth, he's not that brave. The truth, he's not that heroic. The truth, he failed. Jesus was right. Peter was wrong. And then he also probably remembered this. Luke captures this story in this way. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you, that your faith may not fail. And when you turned again, strengthen your brothers. This is actually one of my favorite verses in the Bible. I know, if you're keeping track, this is the 50th time I've said this is my favorite verse, but this one truly is my favorite verse. At the end of verse 32, it says, when you have turned. It's amazing that Jesus has vision for Peter, for not just that he would fail, but that he would turn. He would turn. When you have turned, strengthen your brothers. Peter, you're going to deny me. You're going to weep bitter tears. You're going to see yourself clearly for the first time. And when you've finally gotten over yourself and you've finally gotten over your failings, when you turn, and you will, then strengthen your brothers because you love me. One of the commentaries I was reading this past week went all out to protect Peter. I've never read a commentary like that before. It's like, all these people, they like to bang on Peter. He didn't deny him once. He didn't deny him twice. He denied him 3 times. But Peter's a good guy. And I was like, well, this is an interesting take. So I decided to bring this up a little bit. You know what? That's true. For all of his faults, and there are many, at least Peter followed, right? Where's everyone else? Besides that one other guy. Where's everybody else? Peter loved Jesus, and he's not going to leave him. Well, he kind of did, because he was outside, standing and warming himself, while Jesus was inside. But, he at least went. And Peter did, in fact, repent. I love this passage because I'm just like Peter. I think we love this passage because I think we're all like Peter. In that upper room, you've cried, you've made commitments, and like me, perhaps, you committed your life 100 times over. But in the courtyard, in real life, you've gone back on your commitments. You've done things that you've regretted, just like I've done things I've regretted. I've said things and I've hurt people that I said I would never hurt. And I've walked away from genuinely following Jesus 1,000 times over. And I love the Lord. Both of these things are true. And that's the most amazing thing about the Lord that we serve. He sees us both in our upper room moments and in our courtyard moments. I think it's probably true for a lot of us in this room too. So what do you do? What do you do when you finally see yourself for the first time? You do what Peter did. You weep bitterly, you acknowledge the truth, and then you thank God for the grace that he has for each one of you, and then you keep going. And that's my prayer for you, is that you would keep going in your faith. The most amazing part of Peter's story, it's not actually Peter. He's just the side character in this story. The main character is Jesus. He sees Peter drawing that sword because Peter loved Jesus so much. He just doesn't understand Jesus. He sees Peter following him to the courtyard, but he's too afraid to go all the way in. He sees Peter lying and denying him, and Jesus sees the real Peter, just like he sees the real you in all of our faults and all of our misgivings. While we were sinners, Christ died for Peter. And while we are sinners, Christ died for you and me too. He loves us, he loves you, in spite of all of your failed commitments and your failed promises, because we are God's children, and in God's eyes, we're people worth dying for. So I want to give us an opportunity to pray. Like I said earlier, we are entering into the final seasons of Easter. And I think as we do that, so I'm going to ask us to have a little bit of music. I want to ask all of us to just bow our heads, close our eyes, and just to personally pray.